So it's kind of a snowy day today. Got a little bit of snow earlier, and unfortunately it's kind of melting, but now it seems like it's clouding up again. So I don't know if we're going to get more snow. Certainly not California weather here in Latvia today. So let's hop over to the book of Amos now. Amos and Isaiah, although they write to different audiences, Amos and Isaiah are basically contemporaries, at least the first part of the book of Isaiah. And the writer of Amos are contemporaries. So I think I mentioned a little bit about Amos in a previous lecture, but let's look at Amos a little bit. And Amos, in the first couple of chapters, announces all this judgment. And the judgment is based on violations of some kind of code. In chapter 2, verses 6 and 7, the violation of that code has to do with the law earlier in Israel's history, and it has to do with the way the poor are treated. So, I mean, some really stunning language here in Amos chapter 2. I will not revoke its punishment because they sell the righteous for money and the needy for a pair of sandals. In other words, just they're not worth much, those poor. And notice how Amos juxtaposes righteous with needy. So in some ways, in Amos, and certainly this is the case in other of Israel's prophets, the poor are the righteous poor. Now, I'm not making judgments about whether they're good or bad people. I'm saying from the perspective of God, who is supposed to be their defender, they're righteous in that way, because almost simply because they can't defend themselves against those that would take advantage of them. So Amos, he maps this out in a way that says, we're going to value the poor, we're going to value the needy, and this is how they have been treated, and because of that, God is going to bring judgment. Now, I'm not asking you to accept any kind of theological idea about what God judges and doesn't judge. I'm talking simply about the literature of this book, this religious text, right? And the way these writers represent God's perspective about the treatment of the poor. But again, like in Isaiah, you don't have just one text in Amos. You have a couple of texts. In chapter 4, verse 1, he talks about those who oppress the poor, who crush the needy. There's another part in Amos that talks about the ruts that are developed in the roadway by the weight, the burden of these wagons. It's the same kind of imagery here, who crush the needy. It's almost like putting these two passages together. Amos envisions that the needy and the poor are crushed under the weight, the heavy weight of the oxen and of the carts that they pull. It's really quite interesting imagery, right, for the way we think about how the poor are treated. And I think, again, this is something that in various aspects of the healthcare team, those folks are called to be advocates for their patients, to get the best care that they can for those folks who are suffering, economically, that may lead to physical suffering as well. And that's not my area, but I'm raising the specter of these things because the Fowler text for this week just really impacted me so deeply. All right, so something else that we can look at in Amos. Chapter 5, verse 7, those who turn justice into wormwood. Now, that's kind of an older translation, wormwood, and it's surprising in the text that I use that it uses that old translation. But basically what it means is bitterness. Turns justice into bitterness, and then verse 8, and casts righteousness down to the earth. It's like that which is exalted has been turned into nothing. that which is nothing has been exalted in some way. And Amos talks about a kind of the need to reorient our perspective. I am not calling for a radical redistribution of wealth and those kinds of things. I'm just saying, from the prophet's perspective, the way you treat the poor says something about the way you think about yourself, about the things that you think about that God values. And they want to raise the specter that maybe the way we've been thinking about that, by we, I mean, putting myself and you with me, dragging you back 3,000 years to be, in ancient Israel. Maybe the way that we ancient Israelites have been thinking about that is not the correct way. And then taking that and then bringing it back forward. What does this have to say to me? And how do I approach my practice? How do I approach my work in a way that's consistent with these texts or consistent with other ethical commands throughout religious literature and philosophical literature? These are some places in the Old Testament that the Fowler text, especially that provision 3, really helped me to, I think, unpack my own thinking a little bit more precisely. And so thank you for accompanying me on that journey. And we're going to cut this lecture off, and then the next time we're going to deal with some text from the New Testament. Stay tuned.